Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show.
Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I'm so happy to be here with you today. And I just want to talk about something that's been kind of weighing on my heart and my mind. It's been kind of like ricocheting. Ricochet, remember Ricochet Rabbit? Some of you are going to be in the right age group to remember that cartoon. Ping, bing, bing, Ricochet Rabbit. These thoughts of what I want to talk about today have been kind of ricocheting around in my heart and in my mind. And I know that I've talked about this in other episodes and little snippets, like little sips, as Linda Ty says, here and there. But I wanted to kind of dive into this a little bit more because I think now more, I always say it's not now so much now more than ever, but right now in the world, we really, really, really could use a little bit more of reserving our judgment. And what I mean by that is, and I'll share some of the experiences that I've been having and how this episode came to be. But really, it just stems from talking with people. Not just talking with people, but really listening to people, really just kind of being with people and hearing them when they talk. A lot of times when we're engaging in conversation with people, especially people that we are very familiar with or know and love, like relationships that are close, and whether that's your sweetie or family or friends or whatever, people that we've already kind of created an idea of in our mind, we tend to the brain likes to keep things in the familiar. That's how it experiences safety and it feels like it saves time and it's efficient. But it also can do us a disservice because it doesn't allow us to kind of see outside the boxes of our own creations. So I've been thinking about this idea of reserving our judgment because the fact of the matter is that we often don't have all the information. We do not know the full scope. We don't know the whole story of a person and their history and what they're currently going through. And the ego loves to judge and to slap labels and to determine things when it doesn't have all the facts, it doesn't have all the helpful information. And so I was at a workshop. I was involved in, I led a workshop for this 5-day residency at St. Anselm's College. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But because of that residency and me doing that workshop, I ended up stopping by a place where a couple of friends work and I talked with them. And, I've just been interacting with people and really listening. And, it's fascinating because it's a powerful, powerful reminder when you sit down and talk with people that we, and I will just talk in the first person, so my own experience, I often have no idea what another person is going through. And it's really easy to look at another person and judge them. It's really easy to hear somebody else talk, and you might just hear their accent or you hear something, and you immediately try to label them or judge them, right? And we don't look past the surface of things. The ego doesn't like to go very deep. It likes to stay on the shallow part of life. The brain likes to stay in its conditions and its patterns. And we're like, this equals that, right? We hear this, we think that, we assume that, right? We label that, we judge that. And so often, I'm so grateful. Let me say this, like I'm so grateful for the reminder that I don't know shit. You know what I mean? Like I'm so grateful for the reminder that it's really important that I keep my heart and my mind open. I keep my ears open and I kind of keep my big mouth fucking shut sometimes. You know what I'm saying? It's like to really listen. And because I was interacting with all these different people, my sweetie also had a sold out show, or an almost sold out show at Hampton Beach Casino Ballroom this weekend. So I was just peopling this past few days, right? I was around a lot of people, listening to a lot of people, talking with a lot of people, shaking hands, catching up, giving hugs, the whole thing. And one of the things that I walked away with again is that things aren't always obvious on the outside. I was talking with a friend and, we were just kind of like catching up. We hadn't seen each other in many months. And as we're talking, they just kind of let me know that both of their parents had died within days of each other. These were parents in their 60s. These were young people. And I just looked at them and I was like, wait, what? Now, on the outside, if you just saw this person, you would just think they're fine, they're beautiful, they're bubbly, life is good, like going through, they're working, they're doing whatever. And when they told me this, I literally just like was stopped in my tracks and I said, wait, what? What did you just say? And I realized, again, it's not like this is a new realization. This isn't something that you, dear listener, haven't thought before or realized before, but we forget it. We like let it slip through our fingers. We too casually forget that we do not know what our brothers and sisters and fellow humans, right? The other God's other kids, right? The other humans and animals that inhabit this planet, we sometimes stop really seeing them. We stop being curious. And this is one of the worst things about judgment is it kills your curiosity because you show up in a place of assumption, you show up in a place of judgment, you show up in a place of I already know. When we don't know, again, it's not always obvious on the surface externally what people are showing us doesn't always match what's actually going on inside of them. And, I have another friend who lost their precious dog, who was like, those of you, animal lovers are often having a really different experience than people who are just like, oh, it's just a dog. No, it's not just a dog, right? To us, it's like our family members. It's our beloved companions. They're our furry kids. They are part of the family. Like we love them deeply, deeply, deeply. And, when you lose a beloved animal, a beloved pet, it rocks your world. And I've known people who the loss of an animal for them was worse than the loss of a human, a family member, because it's very uncomplicated, the love that we have with our animals. There is a sweetness, there is an unconditional love that can happen. It's not complicated like it is with human relationships. So that loss can be such a searing loss. And I was talking to this friend who had lost their dog, and on the outside, again, they're usually a very bubbly person, a very upbeat person. And underneath this, because life goes on and people do still have to go to work and they do still have to show up at their jobs and they do still have to kind of participate in life. They can't just like lock up in their houses for, weeks on end. But so many people are moving through the world with at the moment like an open wound, like a gaping wound from some searing loss that they just had, you know? And I read about how another friend, her husband just got the diagnosis that his cancer treatments, that there's nothing else that they can do, that this is it. They've now shifted, they're on hospice watch, and yet these people are just out in the world walking around. And I often think, we're not, how do I say this? We're not damaged goods. It's not like we're broken and we're a mess and whatever. But we are sometimes temporarily wounded. And sometimes we're walking around carrying burdens and trying to navigate life-changing, life-altering news or situations or whatever. And everybody else is so caught up in their own thing and their own perceptions and their own judgments. And we have no idea what our fellow human beings are going through. We make these assumptions and we cast our judgment, and somebody might be short with you at the checkout line at the grocery store. And it's so easy to be like, well, aren't they a cranky pants? Well, they're such a bitch, or they're this, or they're that, or they're not very nice, or they're Somebody just might be simply shy because they grew up in an environment where they weren't ever seen, and to be seen was to be hurt, right? Was to be attacked or abused or maimed in some way. And so they withdraw, and then people think they're stuck up or they're a snob because they are not investigating. And um, there's a quote. I don't know if I'm going to get it right, but doesn't matter. I might even do a whole podcast about this. But it says something like, there is nothing more ignorant than contempt prior to investigation. I think I'm getting that right. There's nothing more ignorant than contempt prior to investigation. And this is what our judgment does sometimes, is we cast judgment on another person when we don't have all the information because we weren't curious enough to ask. We didn't care enough to slow down to actually ask. And we like to ask these kinds of questions like, how are you? When we actually really don't care about the answer. We don't want to hear the answer. We don't want to hear about your trauma or your drama or your stuff. People are just like, I'm too busy. I'm too bogged down with my own shit. I don't have room or time for your shit. And the thing is that if we could just all like remember, like sear this into our brains, like leave ourselves notes somewhere that reminds us that old phrase, right? Everybody is fighting a battle, and I would say an unseen battle. So like be kind to one another. Like I cannot stress this enough. We have no idea what people's stories are. We have no idea. Again, we make assumptions based on people's, like what the human eyes can see. So when we look at another human being, a lot of times what people are doing with their eyeballs is they're sizing up what they're seeing in front of us. They do this by gender, they do this by skin color, they do this by body shape, height, weight, form. They look at the form in front of them and they make all kinds of judgments and assumptions about people. And if they just took a little extra time to actually inquire and get to know, and I'm like, you don't even have to as part of this, right? Because it's really easy to then judge yourself for judging, right? And I'm like, judging is what the ego does. The ego is just gonna do it. The battle isn't about, or the work isn't around, stop judging, because the likelihood of that happening is probably not very high. But what we can do is get way better at recognizing that we are in the process of judging or that we have judged, and then to stop and pause and recognize, I often say to myself, oh, okay, Judge Judy. Okay, Judge Judy, what do you have, your own fucking TV show? Why don't you just relax over there a minute? Why don't you get curious? Why don't you like stop your roll? Like just slow your roll. Put a comma in your commentary there, Judge Judy, and pause. Because you don't know all the facts. And I am showing this, like I am shown this, like STOTJ, spiritual team on the job. I am shown this again and again and again. You would think you would think it would get through my thick head. You would think that this would just be so like seared into my brain right now. And literally, I feel like this is how like Jesus walked the world. Like he did not show up in judgment. He showed up with love. He showed up with curiosity. He saw his brothers and sisters as himself. That we're all just walking around in fear. We're all walking around feeling separate. We're all walking around feeling like on some level, I have no idea like what I'm doing. But we don't want to appear that way. So we put on airs or we pretend or we blow ourselves up and this is what the ego does. The ego's main racket is it loves to keep you separate. It loves to keep you special. It will keep you special in your superiority, your perceived superiority, right? Your pretend superiority. But it will also try to keep you separate and special with your shittiness, with your victimization and how bad you have it, right? The ego is just always running a game. It's always running a racket on us. And if we don't have some practices, some tools to be able to put a comma in our commentary, to slow down, to pause, to recognize, oh yeah, like I'm running that judgment racket. I need to stop and I need to like get a little more curious and a little more caring and a little more compassionate. You know what I mean? And I was reminded of this too. I met some people. So as I was saying, I was invited to do a workshop at St. Anselm's College in Manchester by my friend, the brilliant Dr. Loretta Brady. And she was doing, it was like a 5 day artist residency, and it was about ludographic medicine. It was called Ludographic Medicine Healing Stories. And what these artists and peoples and creatives were coming together to do was to create like a game. And the game was all around like trauma stories and healing trauma and healing through writing. And the guest resident artist, La Flèche, she had written or was working on a full-length graphic memoir. So think of it like a memoir, but through like panels, like in a comic book. It's fascinating. And they created a game, and I think ended up calling it like the comeback kid story, the comeback kid game. And it was really fascinating. So I was invited to come to do a workshop, and we called it preparing your bodies and brains. And it was like yoga and writing with trauma. And it was like, how do we prepare ourselves when we know that we're going to have to do some work? Work that might hurt to do, right? And whether that's revisiting your trauma, writing about your trauma, whatever, but it's work that might hurt to do, but ultimately heals. And it was so fantastic. And it was such an honor to do this. It was such a beautiful group of humans that I got to interact with and share with and learn from and teach. And during this workshop, I got to meet a guy named Mav. And Mav used to be a prison guard. And I thought this was so fascinating. And he said something that just like really, really like caught my attention because I was talking about how it's so easy for us to judge people, right? Because they had just come, and this came up in conversation because these people had just come from a visit from the YDC, the Youth Detention Center in Manchester. And the YDC is going through this major like reform overhaul because like, I don't even know, it's like over 1,000 kids, now adults, right? It might even be closer to 1,300 or 1,500 people have come forward and have filed complaints against their time in YDC and all of the abuse and all of the sexual abuse, the emotional abuse, the mental and physical abuse that happened to them while they were in the YDC. And it's just horrifying when you think about it. When it just goes to prove my point, you might be talking to somebody and they might be struggling. You might be over there judging them and you have no idea what these people have survived. You have no idea who these people are, what their start in life was, and what they have been through and what they have survived. And so Mav was one of the people who was part of this group. And he used to be a prison guard. And we were talking about how I said, nobody wants to be judged for the worst mistake that they've ever made in their life. And this is something that we do with the incarcerated people, with people who have made poor choices. And a lot of times I'm like, who ends up in prison? People who have trauma, people who were not given the opportunity to learn differently, people who did not have good role models or mentors or coaches, people who grew up often in poverty or in situations. And I'm not saying everybody in prison, I'm just saying, but a lot of people who end up in prison are kids who had trauma, who had no support, who had no guidance, who had no tools, were not taught any differently. And when you think about YDC, think about 9-year-old kids being put in a prison-like environment when there's cells. 9-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds. Think about what that does to a child and their development, right? So Mav and I were talking, and he said something that struck me so deeply. And he said, a lot of prison guards, they like to read the files of the people that they're like, guarding. They like to know their background. They want to know all this stuff. And he says, I don't read their files. He says, I don't want to know what they're in there for because I don't want to meet them with my judgment. Man, when he said that, I was just like, it was just so powerful. He's like, I want to go and talk to them and meet them like face to face and get to know them, get to know who they are. And this is what I started thinking about is getting to know who people are, not what they've been or what they've done in their past. Like meeting people right there. And he says, I don't want to judge them. And I just thought, he's like, based on what they've done. I just thought, oh my God. Can you imagine if we all kind of move through the world this way? And the thing is that we are all born and we have this ego. And the ego, again, its main job is to judge. And it loves to based on only what its eyes, like literally the physical eyes, see. And the thing about the human eyes is, and I've mentioned this before in other episodes, is that human eyes don't really see. Human eyes are just the little cameras I think about that record, that take the information in. It sends the information up to the brain. It's the brain that interprets what it's seeing. It's the brain that is going into that judgment, right? And again, the brain likes to categorize things. It likes to save time. It likes to be efficient. So it likes to label and keep things as familiar and kind of group things together and to judge things based on past experiences. So it's like if somebody gets bitten by a dog, any dog that it meets going forward, unless we introduce some sort of pattern interrupt or some new way of thinking about a thing, right? It's going to perceive all dogs as dangerous. And we can do this with other groups of humans. We might label, oh, this person looks different than me. They must be fill in the blank. There's our judgment, whatever we judge it with. And if we don't have a pattern interrupt, which is so much of the work that I do with people, right, is to interrupt our own patterns of conditioning and the stories that we tell and the beliefs that we have. You know, we have to be vigilant about what's going on in our minds. Okay. But the ego doesn't like to kind of do much work beyond what it only sees. It doesn't like to go, beyond that. And, I've shared this quote before. It's a very kind of a Course in Miracles thought. It also gets attributed to like John Overdorf, who says, a person can only be as good in your presence as they first are in your mind. And if in our mind, all we're doing is walking around and judging people, of course, we're going to have these experiences where in our presence, we cannot actually even see who's in front of us. We can't see them who they really are as one of God's kids, as just like us, as one of our brothers and sisters. We're going to show up with our labels. We're going to show up with our stuff. And, that is one of the fastest ways that we keep ourselves stuck in that kind of separation, which just leads to suffering. And our judgment leads to suffering. And I want to be really clear about this, about the ego, mind, and judgment. And I'm just going to read a little something from A Course in Miracles, because I'll never forget when I first read this, how it kind of like, it was literally like, I feel like one of the greatest things A Course in Miracles has done for me is if you imagine a house. And this house, the doors and the windows have been sealed and they're never open. So no sunlight comes in, no fresh breeze comes in, nothing new. It's like stuffy. It's like, it's not moldy, but it's just like, it's not a good environment in there. And it's like all of a sudden, A Course in Miracles for me in my mind, in my brain, right? The way that my thought system worked, it like blew open, it like opened all the windows and all the doors. And all of a sudden, all this freshness, these fresh ideas, this like, oh, like there's more to than just what my little ego perceives, right? And so, in A Course in Miracles, there's this phrase like teachers of God. Teachers of God can be anybody. It's like all humans can be teachers of God. It's not about being special. So, and if you don't, I always say, if the word God upsets you, insert your own happy word there, right? Universe, love, higher power, whatever. Don't get hung up on the word. But it says this: it is necessary for the teacher of God to realize not that he should not judge, but that he cannot. When I first read that, I was like, what does that mean, right? And here's I'm gonna tell you why we actually cannot judge. We fucking love to judge. We love to judge. And then we feel guilty when we do judge because we think, oh my God, I shouldn't be judging. But it's not that we shouldn't be, it's that we actually cannot judge. And I'm going to tell you why in a moment. All right, so stay with me. When we judge ourselves, people, situations, otherwise, from our very limited POV, from our very limited personal experience and personal knowledge, what that does is it basically involves a certain amount of arrogance that we believe that we know how it should be, what should be done, how they should be acting. We believe that we know what's best. When in reality, right, we do not have the capacity to know all of everybody's like why it's going down, how it's going down, all the multiple aspects of a thing, right? What might be influencing a certain person to be that way, what their history is, what their story is, what's gone on, what's gonna go on, what's about to go on, right? We do not have that kind of omnipotent vision, okay? So A Course in Miracles says, it is necessary for the teacher of God to realize not that he should not judge, but that he cannot. And then it goes on to say this, in order to judge anything rightly, one would have to be fully aware of an inconceivably wide range of things, past, present, and to come. One would have to recognize in advance all the effects of his judgments on everyone and everything involved in them in any way. And one would have to be certain that there is no distortion in his perception, so that his judgment would be wholly fair to everyone on whom it rests now and on whom it's going to rest in the future. So who is in a position to do this? Who's in a position to do this? Who, except in grandiose fantasies, would claim this for himself? That, and I think of this like, right, who would claim for himself that they have omnipotent vision, that they know exactly why everything's happening and exactly what that one should be doing and that one should be doing and that one shouldn't be doing that or should be doing this? Who can claim that they know of all time and space exactly why everything is going down? And hence they can, from their God-seated place in the world, be able to cast judgment. Who would do that except somebody who is completely fucking delusional? And when you think about it like that, I cannot help but laugh. Because this is kind of what we're doing when we go into judgment. We are judging everybody and everything based on our very, very, very tiny, teeny, tiny, weeny point of view. Our little limited scope of perception and perspective. And yet we think we know. And the thing is I am taught again and again and again that I know jack shit. That there are people walking all around me in every single moment when I'm out in the world, people that I'm interacting with online, on social media, whatever. And it's so easy to cast our judgment. It's so easy to be cruel. It's so easy to be lacking compassion and care. And to show up with our sarcasm and our cutting comments and our judgments. And you should do this and you should do that. And why are you doing that? And we don't know anything. And what a different world we would live in if we would all just reserve our judgment. Reserve our judgment for when maybe we have a little bit more information. And even then, I would hesitate to judge. You know, in The Great Gatsby, there's a line by one of the characters, Nick. And Nick basically says, reserving judgment is a matter of infinite hope. Reserving judgment is a matter of infinite hope. To me, when we reserve judgment, so much more becomes possible. Because as soon as you judge, you literally close down the windows and the doors of opportunity. They just they slam shut because you are not going to be able to see past your judgment. You have basically cut yourself off from your curiosity, from your compassion, from your desire to know more and understand more and to really learn about another human being or a situation, you know? And I want to say this. We do as human beings, because I know somebody somewhere out there is saying, like, so what? We're just supposed to walk around and not judge anything? Like, so we just let everybody do whatever they want to do? No, of course not. We have to have certain perimeters in place, right? This is why we have rules. This is why we have laws, because we don't want just total chaos and madness out there. We do need to set some things in place, like, hey, to go into another person's house and take their shit, like, that's not okay, right? This is why we have laws, right? Hey, you cannot X, Y, and Z. This is why we have rules. And even that can get a little sketchy when we kind of look at the Supreme Court right now and all the bullshit that's like going down in the world and whatever. Because everybody thinks that they're right and everybody, they'll get me started. Okay, and we're back. Let me stay on track here. Okay. Um, of course we have to have what I prefer to call personal discernment. So I get to discern whether or not a person, a program, a place, a relationship, a product is right for me. I don't get to judge whether it's right for you, right? Like, look, as a vegan, like I always say, it's the easiest example. I get to decide what I do or do not want to participate in. I really try my best not to judge people who make different decisions. I do like to educate people that there are different ways of being in the world that does not inflict harm and cruelty and rape and abuse and murder against our poor little animal friends who don't have a voice and don't have a say and are at the mercy of our compassion and kindness, right? But walking around in contempt of other human beings is not how things change. Walking around judging other people is not how things get done, right? We have to stay open. We have to stay curious. We have to do our best to try to understand, right? But we do get to have a certain amount of personal discernment where we discern, yes, I'm not going to do that, but if that's your thing, that's your thing, right? Where we do get to speak up is when somebody is maybe doing something against a person or people or animals who have no power. And whether that's because they're children or they're disenfranchised or they don't have a voice or whatever it is, then those of us, right, do get to show up and say, I don't think that that's right and we need to intervene here or whatever. Um, I think we have to use our personal discernment, but we also have to be careful when that discernment starts to move into I'm rightness, right? That righteousness, like I'm right. This is how it's supposed to be. This is how it has to be. And there's that old fable about you know, the farmer whose like son, falls off the horse or whatever and breaks his leg. And, the neighbors are like, oh, that's too bad. And the farmer says, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And then the army shows up looking for young sons, young men to like draft into the war. And the son can't go because he's got a broken leg. And then the neighbors are like, what good fortune. And then the farmer is like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And like the story continues on with all these examples. The fact of the matter is, we are not God. We are not omnipotent. We are not all seeing and all knowing. We don't know. But what if we showed up with curiosity instead of leading with our judgment towards ourselves, our judgment towards others? How radical would it be to move through the world? How different would it feel in your body? One of the fastest ways, I know so many people who are so afraid of being judged. And I always say, one of the ways that we can help lift that burden of fear of being judged is to do our best to stop judging others. Again, Don't beat yourself up for it when you do it. Don't make yourself guilty and wrong and bad and sinful and blah, blah, blah. But just catch yourself. Move from a mindless state where you're just kind of automated and doing all this shit to becoming more mindful, to slowing down. This is why a DSP, a daily spiritual practice, can be so powerful because it helps us to kind of create a pause so that we can choose. We can slow down and we can see ourselves. We have more personal awareness, right? And Swami Kripalu, Bapuji. So if you've ever been to the Kripalu Center out in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts, I was trained and I lived at Kripalu and I was trained there as a yoga teacher a gazillion years ago. And, we lived there for a month. And every day in the hallways, I would walk past these pictures of Swami Kripalu, who we call lovingly Bapuji, kind of like grandfather. And whenever I would see this one particular picture of Swami Kripalu, I would always stop and I would get like teary-eyed. Like there was just something that transcended time and space. I mean, he died, I think, back in like, I want to say 1981 or 82 or 83, somewhere in there. So I never got to personally meet him. But there was something, and the word Kripalu actually means compassion. And so there was something about looking at his face. And so in the hallways, there are these pictures and they have these quotes. And one of the things that Swami Kripalu said, or it's attributed to him, he says, the highest form of spiritual practice there is self-observation without judgment. To observe without casting our judgment. To observe ourselves, to be curious about ourselves, right? To wonder, and this is so much of the work that I do. Why do we do what we do, think what we think, believe what we believe, say what we say? Why do we show up the way we show up, right? Why do we tell the stories that we tell, and how can we maybe tell better ones? How can we come to really understand ourselves? Because if you don't know, again, right? To exist in ignorance, I always say, like, confusion is even better than ignorance. And there's no higher form of ignorance than contempt prior to investigation. To thinking that you know how a thing is and to turn your nose up at it, to cast judgment on it when you haven't even asked, well, what's really going on here? What's going on under the under? And this is why so many of us cast judgment on ourselves. We have a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-love because we have so much self-judgment. Like, I should be over this by now. And why? I thought I already dealt with this. And why haven't I figured this out? And why am I this way? What am I, just fucked up or broken or I'm a mess or whatever? And it's like, no. I always say, and I'm doing a whole episode on this, we are not really taught how to know ourselves and understand ourselves. And we certainly not taught how to love ourselves. And so much of this work that I love to do, first and foremost with myself, and also with others, is to learn how to kind of come home to the truth of ourselves. And as long as we are judging ourselves and each other, love cannot happen in that state. We need more curiosity. We need more care. We need more compassion, And so as I think about my friends who are navigating really difficult things, when I think about whole communities and whole groups of people who are navigating really difficult times right now, it would just behoove us all to show up with a little more kindness and compassion and curiosity and softness and mercy and tenderness. I'm not saying don't be fierce when fierceness is called for. I'm not saying that we walk around like big squishy marshmallows, right? I mean, right now we are in times when we need to kind of like find that sanctum sanctorum. We need to find some strength. We need to find this inner kind of resiliency. And we can also do that, though, while reserving our judgment and making assumptions about others. Because again, most people aren't walking around with a billboard that is broadcasting their inner pain and their fear and their suffering. You know what I mean? So as you move through, maybe this is just another gentle reminder. I don't think we can hear this enough. We don't know as much as we think we know. We need to realize not that we shouldn't judge, but that we cannot because we don't know all things past, present, and future. We can't possibly know. And who's in a position to do this? Who, except in grandiose fantasies, would claim that they know what's best for everybody? We can't do it. So, maybe it will help you. And one of the ways, and this is just a little tip, take it or leave it. I use humor a lot. I use humor a lot towards myself, like the things that I say to myself, right? Even when I'm kind of wagging my finger at myself a little bit, they make me laugh. And I'm like, oh, okay, Judge Judy, right? I start to laugh because even laughter, it's a pattern interrupt, right? It stops me from being too mean or too harsh for myself when I catch myself doing exactly what the ego loves to do. And I'm not trying to fight the ego. I'm just trying to accept how ridiculous the ego is. And if I can look at my ego and those behaviors, we talk about it in A Course in Miracles as kind of looking at it with Holy Spirit. I kind of just like put on my love glasses and I look at it through this lens of like, oh, look at that. Ego's doing its thing again, right? I don't have to condemn myself, make myself bad. It's like, okay, Judge Judy has stepped forward. Hit the gavel, hit the gavel and take a lunch break, right? It's kind of funny. So I use humor to kind of break myself out of the habit or the pattern of judging myself too when I slip up, because we're all going to slip up. It's just human. It's just human nature, right? Human nature. You're going to look at somebody and be like, why are they wearing that? And you're like, oh my God. Like, where does that voice come from? Who do they think they are? Like, meh, 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 that ongoing chatter. And it's really just the voice of fear, you guys. It's the voice of fear. That is the ego. But we have within us also, whether you call it Holy Spirit, Spirit, the inner teacher, the voice for love, the voice for God, whatever you want to say, the reminder of God's love, right? That is also in there. And we have a decision maker. And the decision maker can choose whether we're going to choose the ego voice for fear of judgment, attack, blame, shame, or the voice for love and care and compassion and recognizing, oh, they're also me. We're in this together. They're no different than me. I hope this lands in your heart in some way, or I hope it's helpful in some way. And if you found it helpful, I would love if you share with somebody else who might also find it helpful. That would be fantastic. And these are the kinds of things too. Like I'm always inviting you guys into the Nest, my little spiritual group program, my little mentoring community. It's such a community of beautiful human beings. And these are the kind of things that we talk about and contemplate, It's about more deeply understanding ourselves and how we move through the world and how we can show up more in love instead of our fear. How we can show up and use these practical tools of neuroscience and spirituality and, these pattern interrupts and rewiring the subconscious so that we actually show up as who we are meant to be, which is love. So if you want to join the Nest, it's a monthly commitment. You don't want to do it. You do it for a month. You don't want to stay. Like, not for me, you leave, no big deal, but give it a shot. So go to KarenKenney.com/nest. And if you want to work with me together one-to-one, it's KarenKenney.com/quest, QUEST. And if you want this sucker delivered right into your inbox every Thursday morning, bright and early, just get on my email list, KarenKenney.com/sign up, one word, and you'll get on that sucker. And I appreciate you so much for listening or watching. And if you're going through a tough time right now, if you're struggling, if you're suffering in some way, just know that you are not alone. My heart goes out to you. And that, this is how we're going to get through it. We're all going to get through it together. And it's okay. Like I said, use your personal discernment. Do I want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? Should I eat that food or that food? Personal discernment, right? We need that to navigate life. Sometimes we have to make a judgment call, as they say, to do it or not do it. But we want to reserve our judgment, when it comes to walking around thinking we know everything and judging other human beings and sometimes judging ourselves, because sometimes we were doing the best we could with what we had at the time. You know what I mean? Sometimes. Sometimes the ego is just really being strong. You know, the ego voice we say speaks first, it speaks loudest, and I always add, and it's always wrong. So we want to be listening for that voice of love. Remember, the highest form of spiritual practice is self-observation without judgment. So let's quiet those Judge Judys and reserve our judgment and just know, you guys, that I super duper appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. Wherever you go, may you leave yourself and the animals and the people and the planet and the environment better than how you found it. Wherever you go, may you and your presence and your energy and your love and your lack of harsh judgment be a blessing. Bye.